What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have some more updates on that potential tropical development in the Bay of Campeche. We have some more conditions to go over, as well as a few other factors that we're going to be paying attention to in this video. So we're going to go ahead and jump right into it right now. But before we do that, let's go ahead and start with the NHC and going over what is now Tropical Storm Delila in the Eastern Pacific. So let's go ahead and jump over there. Alright, so here's what we have with Delila. It's just now strengthened into a tropical storm as of the latest advisory about 2 hours ago at the time this video has gone out. So here's what we have. Depression strengthens into a tropical storm. Tropical storm warnings are in effect for parts of Mexico. Current sustained winds are 40 miles per hour. Tropical storm force winds for a 40 mile per hour tropical storm extend outward to 120 miles from the center, which is pretty interesting to say the very least. Minimum central pressure is 1,004 millibars. Main threat is the rainfall for right now and tropical storm conditions. And taking a look at the discussion, we're looking at a 65 mile per hour peak according to what we're seeing with Delila. But overall, not too much stronger than that. It's a pretty large but somewhat broad type of system. And we can read a little bit of the discussion just to kind of give you an idea of what we're potentially looking at. Latest satellite imagery depicts that the disturbance south of Mexico has continued to become better organized this morning. First light visible imagery shows that the system has developed a well-defined low-level center and has cold cloud tops. Thus, the disturbance has met the requirements for a tropical cyclone. At this current point, it became Tropical Depression 4E, then it strengthened to a tropical storm. As the depression continues to get better organized, steady strengthening is forecast. However, there is some moderate easterly shear the system will have to deal with. As the system took a little long to consolidate, the NHC will hold its peak, which is lower at 55 knots, which lies near the simple consensus. It's expected to weaken due to dry air and cool SSTs as well. So that's pretty much what we have going on with Delila right now. So that's kind of the main meat that we have in terms of tropical development right now in the Atlantic and the Eastern Pacific. But let's go ahead now and move back to the satellite imagery and show you what's going on from the ground. So pivoting over to the Eastern Pacific very quickly before we move on to the Atlantic and get on to what I really want to talk about today. Here's what we're seeing. We're noticing a lot of convection really blowing up near the center of circulation. It's continuing to look better and better on satellite imagery. We're seeing a lot of very cold cloud tops, and we're seeing this system really get more organized, especially over the last 10 hours or so. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and go back to even 60 frames out just to show you what happened. So we had a lot of convection fire off last night, and then you start to see this wrap around, get more organized as it's starting to build its core. So ultimately, you have this system that's really large, very broad, but it's overall getting its act together, although it might be a little bit too late for it to become a hurricane or anything like that. But tropical storm conditions are possible with this right now, and I do want to go back to the cone and take a quick look at what's going on with that in terms of its... I don't think we have the cone right now, actually. Never mind, we actually do. Pretty large area of tropical storm force winds. That's why the tropical storm warnings are in effect for this part of Mexico right here. So we're going to want to pay attention to that going forward. But by and large, this is a system that's going to continue to organize and develop throughout the day. It's going to have about another couple of days for it to organize and develop and strengthen a bit more before it ultimately moves into a less favorable environment. And then from then on out, it's ultimately going to weaken and ultimately not really do that much after it moves out to sea. So that's the situation that we have going on in the Eastern Pacific. Now moving on to the Atlantic, because things are getting a little more interesting. We're watching a tropical wave over here that's currently coming off the coast of Africa. Is it going to develop right now? No, but that's not the main reason I'm watching this, and we can go ahead and go back to 30 frames just to kind of show you this. The reason we're watching this tropical wave right now is mainly because this wave is expected to move across much of the main development region, enter the Caribbean Sea in the next few days, and allow for some more moisture and some more energy to really move into this region to kind of allow for tropical development to start initiating and start taking place potentially in the Bay of Campeche or the Caribbean Sea. So we're going to want to pay attention to that threat over the next few days. Model runs have continued to indicate that development is possible. However, the main question that we've been paying attention, we need to watch right now is, okay, we're looking at some of the conditions. They're somewhat favorable for development, but the big question we have now is it going to stay far enough away from land, and what is the wind shear going to do? Matter of fact, there is a tweet I do want to pull up from Andrew Austin Adler, who is currently in Storms United with us right now. I'm going to go ahead and pull this up right here. It's not much, however, we could see a shot at marginal genesis at the Bay of Campeche late next week. A broad area of spin associated with the Central American gyre is expected to advect into the Bay of Campeche/Central America region, an area notorious for quick spin-ups given the cyclonically shaped coastline. Upper-level winds are not particularly favorable in this case, and model guidance has been grown keen to a solution embedding the disturbance into Mexico before it has a chance to consolidate too much. Regardless, this will be our best chance for tropical cyclone genesis in the near term. So I wanted to highlight that out right there, mainly just to kind of show you that, number one, I'm not the only one that's paying attention to this. A lot of people are paying attention to this. Mr. Weatherman's paying attention to it. Weather Center Nazario is paying attention to it. David Schlotthauer is paying attention to it. This is something that has piqued our interest, and we're going to continue to watch it going forward. But by and large, you have a situation where this wave right here is going to bring more moisture, and you also have the Central American gyre that's going to act with this as well. So you're going to want to pay attention to those two factors going forward. And we're also going to go ahead now and talk about some of the conditions that we're potentially going to be seeing. So let's go ahead and pivot over to the sea surface temperatures right now. All right, this is what we're looking at right now, and here's the situation that we have. Ultimately, SSTs, the way I look at it, is less of a factor and more of a constant. And what I mean by that is it's more of a, less of, are the water temperatures warm enough, and more of, okay, the water temperature is warm enough, but how do they play in and how high are they going to be? So ultimately, what we're seeing around this Caribbean and the across Central America and in the Bay of Campeche over here is you have 28 plus degrees Celsius waters from pretty much Nicaragua all the way to the Mexican coast over here, with 29 plus degrees Celsius waters hugging the coast of Nicaragua, being a lot more widespread in the northwestern Caribbean, and even more widespread across the Bay of Campeche and in the Gulf, deeper into that region as well. So those are things you're going to want to pay attention to. You're also seeing some areas cracking 30 plus degrees Celsius waters as well, which is also something you're going to want to pay attention to. Now, granted, these 30 plus degrees Celsius waters, which is about 86 degrees Fahrenheit for those of you living in the United States, is on the surface level, and they haven't really gone that deep enough to generate more ocean heat content in terms of just how hot those contours are. But by and large, you are seeing pretty concerning signs with that right there, and that's some stuff you're going to want to pay attention to. You're also going to want to pay attention to the upper level ridge pattern that's going to be over parts of the region around that time as well. So let's go ahead and now show you the 500 millibar height anomalies. All right, here you have a ridge pattern that's going to start building up across parts of the Gulf and much of the eastern United States over here. Why am I bringing this up when we're talking about SSTs? Well, what you're noticing here is higher heights than average typically bring warmer temperatures across the region, and that's why we're paying attention to it, because those warmer temperatures could accelerate the amount of warming that we've been seeing over the Gulf region over the last month or so. So that's what we're looking at right here. You have that ridge pattern that starts to move over in the next few days. Then it starts to break down around the time that tropical development is possible across parts of the Bay of Campeche and parts of the Central American gyre. This potential low over here, this low anomaly right here, is something you're also going to want to pay attention to in terms of its steering currents. Matter of fact, I want to go ahead and check yesterday's 0Z run to see if it's been there. Actually, no, it's not. It's actually moved over a little bit, a couple hundred miles further to the west, and it's also weakened a bit more the ridging that's going on. Why is this important? Well, this pattern right here could ultimately allow for the low pressure system that's going to be affiliated with this tropical wave and this disturbance to move further to the north instead of further to the west for a time period. At least for right now, it looks like as of right now, the way it's holding up right here, and the way that it's kind of pushing, in over here, it looks like it's going to be allowing for the system to potentially drive further to the north. Even the 6Z is showing this as well, so you're going to want to pay attention to this. What does this mean? Well, that means there's a potential for this system to at least get dragged a bit further more out to sea than what some of these models are anticipating. Now, granted, this disturbance is relatively weak, and these steering currents are pretty strong at this current point. So what is a little low pressure system going to do with that disturbance? Well, it is close enough to the Mexican coast over here to cause a synoptic impact with that. Now, granted, is it too weak to like completely alter its course and shift it over to Texas? Yes, that's not going to happen. Yes, that's not going to happen. But you could see a scenario where maybe instead of 25 miles off the coast of Mexico, maybe this system is now 75 miles off the coast. So small deviations like that are what could make or break this system developing. And watching these anomalies and watching these lower height anomalies pan out the way they are, having these runs shifting a bit further and further to the west around the time where the system starts to take shape and starts to enter the Bay of Campeche, that could drag it further to the east and further away from shore for longer to allow for tropical development to take place. You already have plenty of warm water for it to happen with that, and you have plenty of moist air, which we will get into. Now, seeing that could be a kind of more of a driving factor in how it influences the steering currents. And this is also going to be important for later parts of the hurricane season as well. If you see ridging like this, expect systems to get driven further to the west if they're developing in the main development region. If you see something like this low pressure system over here, that's going to curve out to sea. So that's kind of something that to pay attention to in that front as well. So I'm done rambling about the highs and the high and low anomalies right here for the time being. We're going to go ahead and pivot over to the ocean heat content just to kind of give you another indicator, because that anomaly over the parts of the plains in the Midwest in the United States could also drag that tropical wave further to the east and further into some more OHC as well, which granted, if it's a 50-mile difference from it being hugging the coast to it being a little bit more out to sea is something not that's kind of doesn't seem like a big impact, but by and large it could be, especially with these surging OHC values across the Western Gulf over here. So that's something to pay attention to as well. You're looking at, let's say it makes landfall over here. Let's say it hugs the coast, like where my cursor is right here. A slight deviation could pretty much mean the difference between maybe 25 to 30 OHC to potentially 50 to 60 OHC. So that's kind of the gradient I'm noticing with this right. Actually, no, this is an update. This is the updated map right here. So that even highlights my case even more. A slight gradient and slight change like that could really allow for this to move into more OHC and give it a better shot of at least firing off convection, at least trying to develop and all that stuff. So we're going to want to pay attention to that as well. Looking over at the wind shear is kind of the wild card in terms of the conditions with this. The wind shear is not particularly favorable for tropical development in most cases, but we'll have to see if this becomes the exception to the rule or not. We're not 100% sure. We're going to want to pay attention to it, but by and large, you do see the wind shear weaken a little bit and strengthen, weaken, fluctuate, all of that stuff. But as this low pressure system starts to head towards that region, the wind shear does start to increase a little bit right here, although there are a couple of pockets of low wind shear that this system could take advantage of, and we're going to want to pay attention to that as you notice it kind of starting to potentially happen over here on the extreme western coast of the Bay of Campeche and the extreme eastern coast of Mexico right here. So we're going to want to pay attention to it, but also paying attention to how much more wavy this pattern is becoming. This is looking more like a July pattern than a late June pattern. So we're going to want to pay attention to that for later down the road in the tropics, but that's not exactly what I'm talking about Today, I'm mainly concerned about this threat over here that's going to be impacting parts of the Yucatan, Central America, Mexico, those areas. So you're going to want to keep a very close eye on that as well. Last thing we're going to go ahead and take a quick look at is the moisture component to all of this. Overall, at least in terms of when it gets to the Bay of Campeche and in the northwestern Caribbean, I'm not too concerned about it. Like, you're going to see a pretty big moisture infusion across a lot of these regions over here, across parts of the Bay of Campeche and the Western Gulf, as well as this tropical wave tries to organize and develop and move into that region. So overall, dry air is not a concern for me. It's mainly the wind shear and how far away from the coast this system will get. And that's ultimately the deciding factor as to how this system will ultimately pan out going forward. And that's just, again, something we're going to have to pay attention to, and we will keep you updated on. Now let's go ahead and shift over to some model runs. All right, here, this is the exciting part of the video. We're going to go ahead and start with Weather Nerds, and we're going to go ahead and shift this over to give you a better viewing. So what do we see right here? And we're going to go ahead actually and zoom in a little bit just to kind of give you an idea of what we're potentially looking at. So this is what we have for the European. This is the 0Z data from the European. You're still having some pretty good amount of ensemble runs, allowing for the system to at least show something in terms of a disturbance and all of that, although you have a few outliers and a few diamonds in the rough, as I like to call them, that do call for something stronger, maybe something around like 50, 60 mile per hour in a few areas. Definitely pretty consistent in terms of it hugging the coast, that's for sure. But with that shift in the kind of the low pressure area, moving it a bit further to the west, and the ridge weakening a little bit, maybe it'll play a factor in terms of keeping it further out to sea just for a little bit longer to allow for development. We'll have to see if the disturbance is strong enough to kind of reciprocate that. But we'll have to see how that pans out. Weather is pretty unpredictable in those phasems right there. But now let's go ahead and show you the GFS ensembles. GFS ensembles is spaghetti galore right here. It's definitely showing a lot more of an aggressive take compared to the European, with some ensembles wanting this to hit Texas and Louisiana. It's not going to go that far north, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to happen. I can guarantee you that right there. Looking at the 12Z from the latest, yeah, it shifted it further down to the south. But by and large, you are noticing a lot more of these ensemble plots showing something happening. So that's something to pay attention to going forward. Now let's go ahead and go to the operational side of things. The operational runs, I will caution this right now, they do have a hard time developing this system, mainly because of the shear and because of how close to the coast it is. Those are two factors that we're going to want to pay attention to. However, there is one thing I do want to look at very quickly, and that's the vorticity associated with this. Since there is a possibility that, as Austin Adler once said, that this could spin up potentially because of the shape of that coastline right there. So we're going to want to see how that vorticity will pan out. Overall, not seeing too much organized vorticity right now, but that can change. We're still about 5-6 days out from initial development taking place. So we're going to want to watch it. Next thing we're going to go ahead and show you is the GFS run. GFS has always been pretty aggressive in terms of its development. In past runs, it wanted to become a hurricane near Belize. Now the GFS is showing a bit more conservative as of right now. It's mainly hugging the coast at this current point. Canadian run, similar situation. It's hugging the coast right now, although some tropical development, like down to 1,001 millibar tropical storm on the northwestern coast of Mexico, is possible according to the Canadian. And looking at the icon, it's a similar situation to some of the rest of the runs right now, kind of hugging the coast. So we're going to want to see how this will ultimately pan out. But by and large, if something does develop, this is going to be the time where it ultimately does. And we'll have to pay attention to that going forward. Does the NHC tag this as an area of interest? I think they will in the next couple of days, but I think they're waiting for more data and information to come out before even attempting anything. And that data we will continue to look at here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel and update as more information comes out. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help out, if you want to hang out, or you want to ask us questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.